Hello, hello. I figured I would get on here and do, I guess, somewhat of a story time, but also maybe maybe it could help you too, because I've had a really good epiphany this week. So if you're watching this like in real time, meaning you see this in the next month or two, then it's real time. If you see it years down the line, then that's okay. Hopefully you can still like learn from the lessons. So I have had such an interesting week, and it's not my first week like this as a teacher. But I'm a problem solver, so I really do like to try to figure out what's going on. Like, why does this seem like this keeps happening? And so I would say I've had this issue for about maybe like maybe 5-ish years. And so I was trying to think what's changed in education that I'm having this issue over and over now. And, it's like, it's not you, it's me. Because regardless of the group of people I work with, I still have this issue. And so I realized that probably about 5 to 6 years ago is when districts realized that those big box curriculums, they really were not meeting the needs of all the students. And in particular, low income students or Black and brown students, they really weren't tailored to them. That wasn't the demographic. So oftentimes, you're reading stories that the kids cannot relate to, the background knowledge they don't have because it's on topics they haven't experienced or that they're not interested in, and things like that. So I would say about 5 or 6 years ago is when districts really kind of decided, you know what, we might need to let teachers have a little bit more autonomy. So instead of requiring everybody to use this particular curriculum, we're going to allow people some wiggle room to customize the curriculum to better meet the needs of their particular students. So we're all going to stay centered because we're all teach, specific standards connected to a grade level or a subject area. But as teachers, you now have the autonomy to kind of present this information in a way that you think would best meet the needs of your students. So now for a teacher like me, because we're going to fall into two camps and there is not one right or wrong camp to be in, but for teachers like me, this was like heaven, because I used to get my hand slapped all the time for not using the district curriculum, because I would be like, oh, this don't really meet the needs of my kids. I'm out finding stuff. I'm tweaking lessons. I'm creating whole lessons. I'm sneaking doing little lessons that I know are going to help my students become better at whatever it is I'm trying to teach them. Well, I realized though, for some teachers, they love that. They loved being given this giant book, and it walked you through, like some of them were even scripted. So, I mean, it even told you exactly what to say and the whole nine. So I realized that over the last 5 or 6 years, the reason why I keep knocking heads, for lack of a better way to say it, with my coworkers is because everybody is not excited about the fact that we have this autonomy around curriculum. Because depending on what your passions are, depending on your content knowledge, this might be overwhelming for you. So you might say, okay, you have given me a list of standards. I'm not even really clear on what these standards are asking me. And now you're telling me I have to find my own resources. So here comes in this epiphany that I had this week, which is coworkers are not your friends. They're not your friends. Therefore, you should not treat them like friends, and you should not expect them to treat you like a friend. Now, there is a bonus of there are some coworkers that you end up being friends with. But overall, that shouldn't even be the expectation, because when you think about the work environment, you're only around these people because your commonality is that you work for the same company. Now, if you're not a teacher, maybe it's you work for the same company and you're on the same floor or in the same office, or you share a cubicle. Or if you're a teacher, then either you teach the same grade or you teach the same subject. But I mean, that is what you have in common. And that's not the basis of a friendship. And so this week I realized that I have two things that I need to do when it comes to coworkers. I need to be respectful and I need to be professional. But what I don't need to be is be your friend. And so I think this is going to help me, because I've had a really trying week, because I've kind of, like I feel guilty because then people ask me to help them. And then I say no. And then I'm like, oh, I could have. And part of it is, I think, because I love teaching. Like when I say I love teaching, I used to play school when I was like in first and second grade. So I am doing exactly what I love. But I feel like what happens is oftentimes my coworkers and we don't have the same definition of help. So to me, help and do are not synonyms. They are two different verbs. They are not synonyms. I do not use them interchangeably, except when it comes to children. So like when you think about a kid, when a kid says, hey, can you help me tie my shoe? They really mean, can you tie it for me? So can you do it? But they're a kid, so you understand that. But when we get into the world of adulthood and in the workplace, you think, well, you got hired to do this job. And when you got hired, there was not this underlying assumption that your coworkers were going to do your job for you. Now, there's definitely, some wiggle room to help people, but to me, help and do are not the same. So let me give you an example. So in my world, if you know that I'm somebody who loves to create curriculum, so let me give you a scenario. So you're starting a new unit, you come in and we all decide, hey, we're going to bring resources. Now, first of all, if everybody in that meeting does not come with the resource, then that's already a problem, because we agreed that we're all going to bring resources. So if there's anybody in the meeting who does not have a resource, that's already a problem, because now you're like, okay, well, we all agreed on a resource and everybody didn't hold up their end of that bargain. So then we go around and the people who have brought resources say, hey, here's a really great resource. I think it would fit really well with our standards that we plan on covering for this unit. Now, there are two ways that this conversation can go. It can go in one direction where someone on the team will say, oh my goodness, well, what's that story about? And then you tell the person, and then someone else says, you know what, I think that does sound like something our students would love to read. Can we sit down and plan out some lessons and activities that we would do around that book or around that story? Because I teach literature. Now, that would not be something that was done in that meeting. Why? Because people would need a chance to read it, because right now all they know is the summary that was provided. So people would need a chance to read it, and maybe you would either meet later in that week, or maybe if you only meet once a week, maybe you would plan for at the next meeting, hey, let's all commit to reading this story, and then we're all going to come with an activity or a lesson that could go with this story to help teach this set of standards. Now, that's the ideal way that it could go, but that's not how it always goes. Sometimes the way it goes is when you come and everybody was supposed to bring something, everybody doesn't, but the people who do share, what happens is inevitably someone on the team will say, oh, so are you going to create lessons and stuff? Like you're going to do like lessons and slides for that story? And then you say, yeah. And then they say, oh, okay, well, once you create the lessons and slides, can you just share them with us? No, I cannot. And so, because in your spirit that like, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, this does not feel right. I didn't get hired to make stuff for teachers to use with their students. That's not why I got hired. I got hired to teach the kids these standards. And so this is the vehicle that I'm going to use. I'm going to teach them in this way. And I don't mind collaborating and sharing, and somebody else could share their stuff and maybe we could build this giant unit, but that's not usually what happens. And so then what happens is if you start thinking that coworkers are friends, then that's why you feel guilty, because then you're like, well, I could help out because I'm doing it anyway. Why don't I just share it? Until you realize that oftentimes, especially when people have shown you like they're not your friends, they don't even really like you, that it doesn't matter what you do. It's never going to be enough anyway. So why not do at least what's comfortable for your moral compass? And for me, I am no longer comfortable sharing resources that I've created. One, because I have a teacher pay teacher store. And I feel like at this point, if you really want it, you could just go buy it. But two, because I'm not helping you become a better teacher. And maybe this is not the profession for you. And if it isn't, by all means, go find something else to do, or ask the people in the building who have been hired to do that, if that makes sense. So for instance, and I think it kind of goes hand in hand, because I realize this whole idea of like academic coaches, I really think they came about in response to administrators realizing that every teacher was not going to be like me, who was super excited about the death of the teachers editions. And we were like, yes, I can't wait. I'm going to use this. There would be some teachers who were like, whoop, wait a minute, what am I supposed to use? And so I think the creation of the academic coaches was perfect, because then you have people in your building who are experts in this area. And then if you're having a hard time, understanding what a standard means, or organizing yourself, or finding lesson resources, you have someone who that is their job. Now, it's not their job to come knocking on your door asking, hey, do you need my help? And some people, sometimes they do, but that's not their job. Their job is to be there as a resource. And so that if you need something, then ask them. Okay, so fast forward to what kind of ruffled my feathers this week was we kind of have some people out on our team. We have a sub. And so I wanted to be helpful to the sub, because I realized that if I was a sub and I was coming into a position in the middle of a semester, that I would have a lot of different things stressing me out. Like, I got to get to know these children. I have to put their parents at ease, that their education is not going to be interrupted, that I'm going to be able to assist them and get them to where they need to be. I have to learn just the layout of the school. I have to learn the resources that are available. I have to learn who can I ask for what and how can I find this. I have to figure out what routines were already in place, what routines can I add, the whole nine. So I felt like, okay, in an effort to be helpful in our meeting this week with the team, I told the sub, you know what? This weekend, I'll be sitting down planning our next unit, and I will share my slides. Like, do you want the slides? Because if so, that's one less thing you'd have to worry about. Of course, the sub says yes. Well, here's where the issue lies. Well, then one of my colleagues was like, oh, well, can I have the slides too? And I was like, no. And you could tell that like that person was really kind of like, well, why not? And so, of course, I felt bad. So then after the meeting, I went and talked to that person and kind of explained to myself. But at the end, I ended up like sharing it, not just with that person, but with the whole team. And then guess what? How many people said thank you? One. And who was it? The sub. And now, was I in my feelings? Yes. Was I feeling like, see, there I go. Like, I didn't spend this time making this. I didn't even really have to make it. Then I shared it. Then people don't say thank you. But see, those are all expectations that I have for my friends. I expect that when I do things and help my friends out, that they will say thank you. But if we are coworkers, then I should only expect you to be professional and to be respectful. And as long as you are those two things, then I think our relationship should be great. And so moving forward, I am now giving myself permission to say no and not feel like I need to explain my no. But more importantly, I'm also aware of next time, a better way to handle that situation would have been to wait until the meeting was over and then go see the sub and say, hey, you know what? Over the weekend, I'm going to be making some slides for this unit. I can share them with you. In the end, I did not end up making slides because I really just didn't have time to make them, because I really do have a teacher pay teacher store. And that was just going to cut into, me spending time making resources that, I could potentially not just make money on, but then help, a bigger group of people anyway. So I think like the moral of the story is, if you find yourself in this position, whether you're a teacher or you're something else, I think the thing to remember is that our coworkers are not our friends. And that's not a mean thing. And that does not mean that, no, sometimes we can't develop friendships with our coworkers. But I think it actually, I think, is going to make for better relationships, because then I'm not holding you to the standard that I hold my friends to. And we can all coexist. And like a good example is like a few years ago, and I'm going to put her name in here, Naisha, who I just love. We worked together. we are still friends and we work together. We have a very similar work ethic. We both have kids. We have some other things in common, but I loved working with her. Okay. I loved coming into meetings and she would share her stuff. I would share my stuff. It was just a beautiful thing. You just felt like it was like a mutually beneficial situation. And I realized that you can't pick who's on your team. You can't pick people's experience level. You can't pick their confidence in the subject area they're teaching. You can't pick their personalities. There are some people who are just naturally more outspoken than others. And I get that, and I get it. But I think that if we do not hold our coworkers to friend expectations, then our feelings are not hurt. You know what I mean? Then we're not mad at people for not acting the way we think they should. Because again, for me, moving forward, I'm holding my coworkers to two standards that I'm holding myself to. Am I being professional and am I being respectful? So what that means is when I see you in the hallway, do I say hello? That's professional and respectful. Do I need to ask you about your weekend or tell you about my weekend or tell you about the latest shenanigans going on in my life? No. Now I could, but that's not the expectation. And really, I don't really need to. You know why? Because I have friends that I could share all that information with. So hopefully you found this information helpful. Feel free to comment below if you agree, disagree, if you have some other suggestions on how to just navigate that space of, coworker relationships. I'd love to hear them. And until later, be grateful. Bye-bye.